Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our 20th annual Kenneth Owler Smith Symposium focusing on strategic public relations. My name is Ernest Wilson. I'm the Dean of the School for Communications and Journalism. It's a delight to see so many of you here from last year and earlier years. It's always a pleasure for me to come and be able to have an opportunity to interact with those of you who are on the front lines of doing good strategic public relations work. Some of you I know not only are on the front lines of doing the good work there, but also some of our teachers. In fact, I know there are a couple of folks who've taught at the Annenberg School before. Would you just raise your hand if you've taught it? Right on. Okay, excellent. Glad to see you, and welcome back to the Annenberg School. As you know, this is our premier event for public relations professionals and a wonderful opportunity for all of us to see one another again and also to hear words of wisdom from outstanding people in this field. The annual symposium is named, as you know, in honor of Dr. Kenneth Owler Smith, a professor of journalism and public relations, who was one of the people who really helped to establish and solidify the program here at the Annenberg School in the University of Southern California. In 1973, our program became the first accredited PR program on the West Coast. Professor Smith was president of the Los Angeles chapter of PRSA in 1977 and received the Outstanding Educator Award from PRSA in 1979. Following his death in 1989, former students established this symposium as a living tribute to his work as an educator and for his years of service to this great profession. We are especially honored, both collectively and I individually, that his widow, Patricia Thompson Smith, is with us this evening, and I would like her to stand now and be recognized. Welcome back. Welcome back. Tonight's discussion will focus on looking ahead of the curve. And there is no more appropriate topic for this school at this particular moment in time. And if you will indulge me a little bit, I want to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing over the past year since we last met. Because we too are trying to stay ahead of the curve. Because the environment in which schools operate, universities operate, are changing so radically, we have to change radically as well. It's not enough to just do what we did last year or the year before. We have to do things that will prepare our students for the next 30, 40, or 50 years in the job market, moving ahead in this rapidly changing environment. One of the things that we are trying to do is to try to establish what are the competencies, what are the skills and attitudes and knowledge that our students must have when they go out into the work world. So we've been thinking about a bundle of these. On the one hand, we want to stick with traditional verities, as I call them, the ability to think clearly, the ability to write well and communicate effectively across multiple platforms, traditional things. But here at the Annenberg School, we also want to build in the following attributes or competencies in our students. One is innovation, hugely important, and I know you'll hear more about that from Mr. Iwata later on today. Another is innovation, leadership, cultural competence, empathy, the ability to operate across multiple silos, if you will, are increasingly important in today's environment. And for that to happen, we believe it's important that those skills be learned in a converged environment, because that's what's happening with the media. Happily, here at the Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism, we do operate in a converged institutional environment. In fact, we like to say that we were converged before the technology converged, because we have a journalism school, which includes a public relations program, a communications program, public diplomacy at the graduate level, undergraduate level, mid-career. So we believe that we do offer a full-service school so that students of public relations can learn the latest theories of communications, the latest practices in journalism, what's going on internationally through our public diplomacy program. All of this under one roof in a networked university in the most global and diverse city in the United States of America. We believe, therefore, that the issue of breadth and depth is absolutely essential. Where is that trade-off point? We're not 100% sure. But we are working with our colleagues in public relations and communications to find out the right balance. So it's not just the technology, but nor are the students unexposed to the important elements of technology. I'm going to close by just sharing with you, before I introduce my colleague Jerry, a couple of result of a trip I took to New York City recently. A member of our board of counselors is the CEO of Weber Shandwick. And I said, you know, Harris, we're trying to figure out what the heck we should teach our students and who should do the teaching. What kind of professors should we hire? And I said, would you be willing to convene a meeting of some of your colleagues in New York to help us think this through? Because our school, like other schools of public relations, has got to get closer to the industry that we serve. And so he pulled together a few firms. I heard of a couple of them, something, Hill and Knowlton, is that the right term? And something about APCO people were there, and Mark Penn, and it was a fascinating discussion and a very frank discussion. And so here you have CEOs of the 5 largest PR firms talking about the need for new kinds of competencies, the ability to work together in a team, the ability to think analytically, an intuitive sense of globalization. And one thing they said again and again, and this I say to the students in the audience, one of the people said, I'm so tired of reading the same resume over and over again, and people do all the same things. I don't want to hire those people. I want to hire people who've done different things, who have different experiences, who come from different backgrounds. So I urge all of you, for seniors, I know it's too late, but tough, but I will assume that with an Annenberg education, that will help a lot. But for those of you who are freshmen and sophomores, get out there and do weird stuff. That seems, I mean, I'm putting it much less eloquently than Harris and my new friends did there. But they said, teach new things. They said have a great mix of practitioners and scholars, especially scholars, these practitioners said, because the demographics are changing so much. They need to know, we need to have scholars who can teach statistics and how we analyze and interpret data and long-term trends and globalization. So there is the place for deep scholarship, and there is the place for practitioners, like many of you in the room, to come in and help our students learn what they need to learn. They gave us some research topics, social media, demographics, as I mentioned. And then service, the question that I asked to them, and it's one that I want to ask to those of you in the room who are professionals, because we want to do better. We think we're very, very good, but it's not enough because in this changing environment, you've got to stay ahead of the curve. And so they said what they would welcome from the Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism is some sense of what are the big ideas that are affecting the world of public relations? What are the big global trends that are affecting the world of public relations? How should they balance their thinking about technology on the one hand and basic social patterns on the other? So I am committed, and Jerry was certainly at that meeting, Jerry Swerling, to do a better job of being more interactive with our colleagues on the professional side. And so I would like to ask those of you who are professionals in this room the same thing that I asked to your colleagues in New York. What can we do better? What can we do to better serve the industry that you so ably represent, both in terms of our teaching, in terms of our service, et cetera, et cetera. So I really hope that you will take us up on this and be in contact with the school. I know Jerry and his colleagues are in contact with many of you on a regular basis, but it would be, I would like to ask you personally, what are we doing well? What do we need to do better? and how can we develop ways to have this kind of conversation on an ongoing basis. So we will hope to follow up in the very near future on these ideas. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to my tutor for public relations, who is the Distinguished Director of Public Relations Studies Programs here at the university, and also Director of the Annenberg Center for Strategic Public Relations. This is Jerry Swerling, of course. Jerry Swerling was named Public Relations Person of the Year by PRSA in LA in 2000, and has more than 157 years of experience as a, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, more than 34 years of experience as a senior level communications educator and professional. Jerry has really been, really combines the wonderful elements of the thoughtfulness of a scholar who thinks about these long-term issues, understands their importance, and also the experience and depth and sensitivity of a practitioner. And so without further ado, I will say one more quick thing, which is I had a really cool opportunity this afternoon. I got to spend about an hour and a half with our guest speaker. I don't want to put him on the spot, but it was, as I think you will see, this is a gentleman who has a sure grasp of both the communication side and the marketing side. I think I took 9 pages of notes while we were just sitting in the office, so I know you're going to enjoy Mr. Iwata's remarks tonight. But let me invite my colleague Jerry Swerling to the podium.
Thanks very much, Dean Wilson. Thank you for those kind remarks. This is quite a great crowd. I think this is probably among the biggest crowds we've had for Smith Symposium. Now, you all know, of course, that Lady Gaga will be here tomorrow night. You're not making any mistake about that, I hope. Let's see. The Smith Symposium, it's now 20 years old. We've been doing these things for 20 years, which is just extraordinary to me. There are so few things in this business that have that kind of longevity and continuity. And so for us to be doing these annual events over such a long period of time and have such a terrific group of people come together, so many students and so many practitioners and so many educators, and share this moment in time in all of our busy schedules just once a year. I don't know about you, but it's really a kick for me. I really enjoy it. And I hope to see you coming back for many, many more Smith Symposia in the future. In the 20 years of the symposium, indeed in the last 8 or 10 or 12 years, PR studies here at USC Annenberg has changed a lot. We've made an enormous amount of progress. We have, just to give you a quick summary, we have 135 wonderful students in our undergraduate program in public relations. We have now 84 students from around the world in our master's in strategic public relations who are just doing extremely well. We've got a near record number of applications for the fall for the master's program. And when you ask people, why are you so interested in this program? What they say is, look, there's nothing else like it. It's a wonderful balance of application, theory, strategy, critical thinking. There just isn't another program like it. And of course, they like the warm weather of Southern California too, we hasten to add. Next year, we're going to be adding 2 outstanding, please keep my fingers across, 2 outstanding new members of our full-time faculty, both of whom have deep expertise in digital and social media. So I think they are even going to further advance our ability to give our students the most wonderful educations in public relations anywhere in the United States. And our graduates continue to find, even during difficult times, our graduates found excellent jobs, and we've watched them advance through the professional ranks at astounding paces. And we hear from them, they get back in touch with it, and it's just, believe me, when people talk about some of the wonderful things about teaching, one of the most wonderful things is to hear from people who studied with you some years ago and see that now they have titles like vice president, corporate director, partner, whatever it happens to be, and we're seeing more and more of that. And that's really so gratifying to educators like us. Our general feeling is that, like the profession we serve, we have a lot of momentum that's advancing us forward, and we have a tremendous amount of opportunity before us. We think we've made a lot of progress, we've done a lot of great work, but as Dean Wilson was touching on, we have a lot more to do. And we think we can get it all done because we're assembling the team, we have the resources, we have the leadership, we have the wonderful students and the alumni to make all of that happen. Now, as the years continue to go by, as we advance into the future and continue to have Smith Symposia, we're certain to have PRSLA as a partner in helping us maintain our dialogue with the professional community. And representing PRSLA tonight is Eric Moses, their president. Eric, come on up. Eric is the Director of Corporate Communications, I think I'm close, at Occidental Petroleum. And also, he's been a wonderful teacher. Eric taught in our undergraduate program. The students loved him. So, Eric, what do you have to say on behalf of PRSA? Please.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Dean Wilson. It's a pleasure for us to be here. PRSA-LA has been really enthusiastic about joining and working with USC Annenberg for all these many years on this particular symposium. Thank you again to the Smith family for being here and for starting this program. I just want to say a couple of things about PRSA-LA. That we're also about advancing the profession. I think that's our mission, and it's about advancing from the students to the young professionals into the communicators and the senior professionals, and we have a bridge that we can take the right out of school here into senior level management at corporate communications departments all over the U.S. We have a program called the Public Relations Student Society of America, where students are involved with. And this year our board has voted to double its commitment to all of the chapters as a chapter at USC. And in addition, we decided to allot a small amount of money, about $250 to each chapter, that helps us promote a program through developing a communications plan, through implementing it. And that will give some real life experience for students. And we hope that the USC chapter will take advantage of that opportunity. I just want to encourage everybody, all of those of you who are not members, to join PRSA-LA to get these benefits and to become a student, and then to a young professional, and as a young professional organization, and then to join PRSA-LA. This month and next, the National is offering a discount on dues. If you're a new member, you get $80 off your dues, which is free local chapter dues. So it's a big incentive. Some of our programming in the coming weeks and months I'd like to highlight, so hopefully you can get excited about what we do and how we try to advance our profession here in Los Angeles. We have a very popular program called the At Breakfast With, where we bring in journalists to come in and talk to PR professionals about what they do and how they do their job. And mostly it's assignment editors. It's the people who are gatekeepers to news. And it's a good interaction. It gives professionals a way of knowing what is happening and how to get their stories pitched to news outlets and get their stories told over the airwaves or in print or online. Our next At Breakfast With program is April 14th, and it features online news media editors. So it'll be a good, we have one really high keynote person, a guy named Steve Rosenberg, who was, after I came out of USC's graduate school for journalism, was one of my first editors at the Daily News, or actually at Glendale News Press. He's now at the Daily News doing their online event. We have a Young Professionals event, excuse me, on April 17th. One of our most popular events of any year is our studio tours. Television station studio tours. Our one this year is going to be April 28th at CBS Studio City. It's with KCBS, KCAL. And we anticipate their general manager, a news director, and a couple of reporters to be there. So it'll be a really good interaction. You get to tour their new studios if you're interested. May 26th, this is one of our, as PRSA, we're trying to raise the level of our speakers. We have a conversation with LAPD Chief Charlie Beck. What we'd like to know more about is how the LAPD deals with public relations and how they communicate what they need to communicate in Los Angeles. And we think that'll be a great event. And lastly, which I think will be of interest to many people in here in public affairs, is an event on, hopefully, at the end of July, featuring former and current and former press secretaries for Michelle Obama, Laura Bush, possibly Nancy Reagan, sorry, and communications director from one of the from the first Bush White House. So really good programming coming up this year, and there'll be more throughout the year. Again, thank you for having us. We also have, lastly, I know there's a laundry list, but Western District PRSA Regional Conference is April 28th to April 30th out in Palm Springs. There's a lot of information on our website, PRSALA.org. Thank you very much. And now back to Jerry.
Let's see. And now it's indeed a great pleasure to introduce a gentleman whose name invariably comes up when you ask knowledgeable professionals to name the smartest, most forward-thinking people in the business. Yes, John, I am talking about you. Jon Iwata leads IBM's Marketing, Communications, and Citizenship organization. His global team is responsible for market insights, demand generation for IBM products and services, communications and corporate affairs, and stewardship of the IBM brand, which is recognized as one of the most valuable in the world. Jon and his team led the development of IBM's Smarter Planet strategy, which describes the company's view of the next era of information technology and its impact on business and society. Jon is a member of the IBM operating team responsible for day-to-day marketplace execution, and the IBM strategy team, which focuses on long-term issues and opportunities. He's vice chairman of the IBM International Foundation and reports to IBM chairman and CEO Sam Palmisano. Jon joined the communications function of IBM in 1984. Actually, did you start as an intern? Yeah. So Jon, for those of you who are wondering about the value of internships, okay, look no further. He joined the communications function of IBM in 1984 at the company's Almaden Research Center in Silicon Valley. In '89, he joined IBM corporate headquarters in Armonk, New York. He was appointed VP of Corporate Communication in 1995 and Senior Vice President Communications in 2002. He assumed his current role on July 1, 2008. Jon is a member of the Technology Committee of the Museum of Modern Art, the University of California's Economic Advisory Group, and is a trustee of the Arthur W. Page Society. From 2006 to 2007, he served as chairman of the Seminar, a professional group consisting of chief communications officers. He holds a BA from the School of Journalism and Mass Communications at San Jose State University. And if that's not enough, Jon is also co-inventor of a U.S. patent for advanced semiconductor lithography technology, something you don't often see in a PR person. Please join me in giving a very warm Trojan welcome to Jon Iwata.
Thank you very much. It's very warm. Thank you, Jerry. So here I am at USC, and somebody handed me this button from the student store, Beat San Jose State. So it's a real pleasure to be here. Well, thanks, Jerry, and thank you, Dean, and thank you, Eric. Thanks to PRSLA. It's a real privilege to be here at Annenberg, and particularly for this symposium, to talk about the future. I think Annenberg, PRSA stand out because they are committed to being at the forefront of our profession, our professions, and this is a very important time, as Dean Wilson described. When you think about the public relations profession, what it will look like 10 years from now, the place to start, in my opinion, is not with PR, but with the world at large. And the appropriate time horizon is not a decade from now, but a century. 100 years from now, Annenberg students will be studying the profound changes that you and I are living through right now. And they will not be focusing on Twitter, Facebook, or iPhones any more than today's students study the mechanics of the steam engine or the engineering of Gutenberg's movable type. Of course, they will note the phenomenally rapid global adoption of the internet and of all forms of digital technology. But they will focus and study and learn about what these changed, the deeper meaning of how universal access to information change and transform the way people think and create knowledge, how they interact, and how they make decisions. They will be amazed and a little amused that before this period, the tools of information production were in the hands of the very few and powerful, the newspapers and producers, the broadcasters and publishers, but that the digital revolution gave everyone the ability to publish and to broadcast and to report at near zero cost. They will learn that this is a classic example of a disruptive innovation and consider as case studies all of the bankrupt newspapers and hollowed out magazines and diminished television networks that failed to adapt and innovate. By the way, they will annoy or perhaps gratify the professor by asking her to explain what a newspaper, magazine, and television broadcast network was. And the most important lesson of all, a century from now, they will learn that civilization took a great leap forward in the early part of the 21st century because of this timeless truth about knowledge. Changes in what people know change what people expect, and that ultimately changes behavior. The behavior of public figures and the behavior of institutions, from the companies we work for and buy from and invest in to the governments that we elect. And 100 years from now, students will still be late to class. It is hard to understand the meaning of change when we are experiencing it. But if what I've suggested is a reasonable estimation, then the question is, what do we do differently today? Well, I would like to offer the perspective of someone who is in the midst of trying to implement new approaches and innovations in a large and complex enterprise. It is too early and too presumptuous to offer best practices, but instead I'll try to describe what I believe are emergent new disciplines in our corporate function, the contours of a new profession, if you will. And let me start with the first one. We are fusing the management of brand and the management of culture into a new discipline, into a new management discipline. Lincoln said, character is like a tree, reputation is like its shadow. And I love that. I am afraid that too many in marketing, advertising, and public relations think their job is to manipulate the shadow rather than to tend to the health of the tree. Maybe at one time it was possible to manage reputation or brand or image separately from the reality of behavior and performance. But that's a delusion in this world of transparency and democratized media. It will be increasingly difficult for companies and individuals to live double lives. All of the gotchas, all of the shocking glimpses at unguarded moments shared with the world undermine trust. They reveal a disparity between what we say and what we do. A corporation that behaves this way fails to deliver on its brand promise. A person who behaves this way we call a hypocrite. These forces are driving us as people and as organizations to deeper levels of authenticity, and that's a good thing. As never before, people care about the corporation behind the soft drink, behind the bank account, behind the computer, and they do not divorce their opinions about that company from their opinions of that company's products and services. People care about the behavior and compensation of the company's executives. They care about the product, how it was made, where it was made, and who made it. They care about how the company treats its employees and its suppliers, how it impacts the environment, and how it responds to crisis. Now, maybe people always cared about such things, but really, how much could they actually know about what was happening inside of our companies and institutions? One day soon, every employee, every retiree, every customer, every business partner, every investor, and every neighbor associated with every company institution will be able to share an opinion about that company with everyone in the world based on firsthand experience. And the only way we can be comfortable in that world and indeed turn it to an advantage is if every employee of the company is truly grounded in what the company values and what it stands for. Well, what are we doing about this at IBM? We have brought our shared values to center stage, and this is not the same as our code of conduct or compliance processes. Every company has those or should. Our values describe what makes IBM unique, what we stand for, and what we believe in. Of course, they only matter if they're lived and applied consistently by everyone in the company. It's challenging. We have more than 400,000 employees. But this is why we instilled our core values not through a task force or a consultant or a focus group, but through an open jam, is what we call it, for the entire workforce on our global intranet. It was an open collaboration. And so these truly are our IBMers' values. They are not the company's values promulgated to them. It is also why last year we created a new discipline within my organization, which is a combination of marketing, communications, and CSR. This new discipline puts together brand management with what is traditionally called internal communications. Now, this may sound to some like external and internal messaging coming together, employees as brand ambassadors, that old chestnut. And sure, that is an aspect of it, but that's not the reason why we did it. The centerpiece is something quite different. It's what we call the IBM brand system. Picture a framework with 5 columns. From left to right, the columns are labeled what it means to look like IBM, to sound like IBM, to think like IBM, to perform like IBM, and to be IBM. Simple enough. You could, in 30 seconds, create the same frame for Coca-Cola, Disney, or USC. But of course, the details would necessarily take you a lot longer, and they would be the subject of great discussion and debate, because the details of what it meant to look like, sound like, think like, perform like, and be anything would describe what makes you unique and special and differentiated. It would be the equivalent of your institution's genome. Now, a couple of things I think become obvious, and one moves from the left to the right in this kind of system. To really activate it, to bring it to life, you go from managing outward expressions and manifestations of the company, visual identity, naming conventions, industrial design, trade dress, messaging, voice, and the like, which is where most brand systems begin and end, to the performance of products and services, and ultimately to the behavior of people, of everyone in the company. This requires a great skill that is in short supply: collaboration with other parts of the company, from product engineering to human resources. In essence, this means that this brand system is inclusive of our corporate culture. This is, in fact, the secret sauce, if you will, behind our integration of marketing and communications and corporate citizenship 2 years ago. Yes, it's more effective to speak with one voice across advertising, promotion, the media, bloggers, trade shows, and all of the other external influencers. But we believed that the real power of putting these teams together would come from integrating our culture and our brand with our shared values as the foundation of both. Experts in the workplace and experts in the marketplace are now on one team. As you can imagine, classic communications and classic marketing have a role here, but this is fundamentally not about messaging or employee engagement. This work requires management rigor to systematically identify the gaps between aspiration and performance, and then to take the actions and to measure the results as we endeavor continually to close those gaps. The tree and its shadow. Now, this is why we believe it deserves to be a new discipline, and that's what we've done. Let me talk about the second aspect of what may be this new profession, and that is the creation of constituency. We talk about constituents and audiences and publics all the time. And there is much to say about how, in this new world, we reach our audiences. For one thing, I believe that all companies will become publishers, broadcasters, and analysts. We will go direct because we can. The tools of information production are available to us as well. And the economics are incredibly powerful and to some destructive. At IBM, we're investing heavily to become a publisher, but this is a very particular sense of publishing. Pumping out information only adds to the noise and compounds the challenge of being heard. And I heard recently that in the future, everyone will commit a random act of journalism. It's true. So even news is commoditizing. Value will come from providing perspective and useful information for making a contribution to our audience's knowledge. This is what I mean by creating constituency. It gets to how a company establishes shared attraction and shared values, how it shapes not just common ground, but a deeper, enduring shared idea. Consider Apple. We all admire Apple. They are brilliant, iconic marketers, brilliant product designers, and shapers of a distinct corporate culture. But the much deeper story is that because Apple was so in touch with their character as a company, they understood the passion of their chief constituency, contrarian thinkers, who value creativity, simplicity, design, and being different. And so their tactics logically flowed from that. They don't just advertise, they teach. They don't just sell, they create learning experiences in their stores. They want you to actually learn everything the product can do, because then you, with great enthusiasm, will teach others. This is why visits to the Apple Store Genius Bar are free to you as a customer. They don't pitch at you, they teach you. And in the process, they recruit both new and loyal customers as advocates and evangelists. Apple has gone far beyond the traditional media and means of marketing and PR and has become publisher, teacher, community maker. Or consider a tire company that more than 100 years ago was looking to expand its market. Now, this company could have simply promoted their tires more aggressively or artfully, but they were limited by the amount of driving that people were doing. So in addition to promotion, they created ideas, information, resources, and evaluations of hotels, of restaurants, of destinations. They gave people ways to enhance their lives, reasons to drive more. And hence the tire company became a publisher as well, the creator of a universally respected, some would say definitive resource, the Michelin Guides. What were Apple and Michelin doing? They weren't simply promoting themselves or their wares cleverly, although they generated tremendous demand for their wares. They became publishers, educators, and facilitators. Another way of thinking about it is this was a different kind of segmentation. They looked at people not by income or geography or gender, but in terms of their beliefs and desired lifestyle, of certain ways people achieve feelings of engagement and self-worth. And having identified that segment of the population, they fed, nurtured, and inspired those beliefs and those people. They made those people a better version of themselves through the provision of knowledge, with tools, or by providing encouragement. They were creating constituency. And I believe this rigor of building constituency with customers is just as applicable and powerful to employees or NGOs, government officials, and investors. The agendas and interests may be different, but it is possible to hold them together by enabling them to participate in your enterprise's core idea. At an earlier time, IBM did this. No one asked IBM for the first mainframe, but it turns out there was always a segment of the marketplace and the investment community and the workforce that stood for the things that the mainframe or the computer helped deliver. Not just data processing, but progress. Not just computation, but transformation. A way to, in a word, change how the world works. Today, we have rediscovered this constituency, the forward thinker in everyone, and they are just rediscovering us. This is the basis of our Smarter Planet strategy. We are specifically and deliberately working to validate and stoke the optimism of forward thinkers. We are saying to them, because we believe it ourselves, your hopes for your company, your industry, your city, your community are now within your grasp. A smarter planet is not a metaphor. We can actually build a smarter planet. We see it in the data. We are attracting people to IBM not on the basis of what differentiates us, but on the basis of shared values and beliefs. Our work, therefore, flows from this. It tries to get at the real substance of change and the real issues on the table. Much of it is long form. It is argued, not pitched. It deliberately invites people to think. This is not an abandonment of mass market advertising. Although the business models of advertising and of media are under attack, we shouldn't confuse that shakeout with the continuing need of corporations and institutions to reach mass audiences, to be heard at scale, and to establish presence. And advertising is a very good way to do that. But it must assume new wisdom and take on new forms. I entirely agree with the ad executive who said this: I do not regard advertising as entertainment or art form, but as a medium of information. That was David Ogilvy, and that was the first line of his bestseller, Ogilvy on Advertising, published in 1983. Frankly, I think David Ogilvy would despair over the state of advertising today, and not merely its troubled economics, which are not sustainable. He would repudiate its superficiality and its wastefulness. Ogilvy and Mather is our advertising agency today. And together, with a little prodding, we are trying out new ideas. We do not want ads that merely get people's attention or break through. The greatest compliment I have heard about our recent television ads isn't they're funny or they're catchy or even they want to make me know more. The greatest compliment I hear is that they want to make me learn more. When I hear that, I know we're moving in the right direction toward building constituency. And now the third and last dimension of what this new profession may be becoming, building the eminence of our workforce. I believe that 2010 is the year that corporations grapple with and ultimately accept that their employees are engaging with and must engage with social media. We will go through, and we are going through it, a necessary period when people raise all kinds of objections, and I know what they are. The CFO worries about disclosure. The general counsel fears intellectual property leakage. HR says we are aiding and abetting the recruitment of our top talent. And everyone frets about criticism of management. This all happens, by the way, so these are legitimate concerns. But let's assume that we can address those issues. And as with the telephone and the fax machine and email and the World Wide Web itself, not that long ago, we will see that social media will somehow take its place as a tool of business. We will establish a set of guidelines and policies to ensure that social media enters the front door of our companies. But then what? Policies and guidelines may keep individuals and their companies out of trouble, but that by themselves, that doesn't create business value. So what will? Well, think about what you seek when you search for something on the net today. It could be anything from a digital camera or a rental in Tuscany or a smart grid. Today, what you find is content. Lots of content. Websites, articles, user-generated reviews, an infinite amount of marketing material. This is how the game is played today. And so we pay dearly for search, and we flood the web with content, hoping that people will find it. But very soon, people will be searching not just for content, but for experts. Experts. Not just anyone who has a time or inclination to tweet or blog, but people who actually know what they're talking about. And once that begins, and once corporations realize that, companies will flood the net with their people the same way that corporations flooded the net with content starting in 1995. But if you play that out, isn't it obvious that by itself, when everybody does that, simply having your people on the net is not a differentiator? What will determine success or failure? It's not whether your people show up on the global commons, it's what they do once they get there. The key, in other words, is to build the eminence of your workforce. But what do I mean by eminence? No matter what their industry or their profession or their job, people with eminence are acknowledged by others as being expert. It's simply not enough to know something about Tuscan villas or digital cameras or smart grids. People with eminence are experts, and they have a network of people who say, yes, you are an authority. And there's something else. They're good. They're good at networking. They're good at communications, because we all know that being an expert and being good at communications are not necessarily the same thing. Which is why we, professionals, we need to make the creation of this kind of workforce an intentional act, a new kind of discipline. And ironically, what we've discovered is that the people who are most threatened by this shift, not the general counsel, not the CFO, not the head of HR, it's the communications professionals. We are tasked now with making others as expert as we are in the field of communications, and that makes people uncomfortable. Why? We are the authorized spokespeople. We are the crafters of messages. We are the producers of high-quality web content and events and video and ads. But like all priesthoods, we will get over that resistance. We have to take that next step and build the eminence of our workforce, and I believe we will. Let me conclude by offering what I think it all means to the students here and to the educators and to the practitioners among us. All of these changes stem from the historic explosion of information in all its forms, and it's only going to get worse or better. Every day we're creating 15 petabytes of new data. That's 8 times as much data in all the libraries in the United States every day. Information is growing at 60% compounded annually, and the nature of data is changing. Facebook is home to 40 billion photographs. 30% of all of that data, medical images. We're approaching 1 trillion connected intelligent devices on the internet, machine-to-machine generated data, all throwing off information in real time. And that's not including, or that's in addition to the tweets and the pokes and the messages and the uploaded videos. How are we going to cope? I recently read a book about a blind skier named Mike May. Yes, a blind skier. He lost his sight in a strange accident when he was 3 years old. Nonetheless, he learned how to ski. He developed a mental picture of the world based on his other senses and experiences, and it permitted him to navigate not just the ski slopes, but airports and cities and daily life. And then 43 years later, an experimental procedure restored his vision. And as incredible as the surgery was from a medical standpoint, the remarkable thing about Mike May's story is what happened afterward. Ever since the operation, May's brain has struggled to interpret what his eyes are telling him. At first, it was harder for him to converse with someone while his eyes were open than it was for him to ski down a mountain without the aid of his vision. It was just too much input. He knew how to navigate the airport, but he didn't know there were restaurants and shops available to him there too. He knew how to get down that ski slope, basically going straight down, but now he realized he could use the whole mountain. May had constructed a picture of the world, and now that picture was being challenged every second. In a way, that's what's happening to all of us. We're seeing far more than we ever thought possible. And so the world is suddenly vastly richer and more complex and almost overwhelming. And like Mike May, we'll need to learn how to process this new reality and how to make sense of it. And that has more to do with understanding context and meaning than with multitasking and speed. We will have to challenge our assumptions and our preconceptions of our world. We will literally have to see and think differently, and that is the hardest thing you can ask people to do. But in return, we will discover new possibilities, explore options we didn't even know existed. We will make our decisions not based on guesses or extrapolations or interpolations, but decisions based with certainty and greater confidence. And we will understand our world, the real world, with far more detail and immediacy. So my take, go out and take advantage of all of it. The data, the analytics, the tools, the technologies, the broad liberal arts education here at Annenberg, and the shared learning of the planet's first truly global generation. Use it all to see the world with fresh eyes, be curious, and embrace change. 100 years from now, people will notice. Thank you very much.
It was rather interesting. All right, there'll be a quiz tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Papers are due tomorrow afternoon. We've asked, because we knew that this was going to be kind of thought-provoking, we've asked a group of folks, a three-person panel, to join us on stage to talk about what Jon has had to say and share our own thoughts with what the future of the business might look like. We'll do that. Each panelist will take about 5 minutes, 6 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers. So now I have the pleasure of introducing our esteemed panelists. The first is my good friend Diane Dixon. Come on up, Diane. Diane Dixon is Senior Vice President of Corporate Communications and Advertising for Avery Dennison Corporation. Avery Dennison is the near $7 billion global leader in pressure-sensitive technologies for the consumer and office products market. So pretty much everything you own that sticks to something else was made by Diane's company. She was named to her current position in December of 2000. Diane joined Avery Dennison in 1982 as Director of Corporate Communications and was named VP Corporate Communications in November '85. In her current role, she's responsible for strategic direction and management of all aspects of corporate communication and advertising. So she, too, has within her purview all aspects of communication. She's a member of the Board of Directors and Chair of Women Leaders of the United Way of Greater Los Angeles. She's a member of the Board of Directors for ALS of Greater LA, KCET-TV, and the Los Angeles Area of Chamber of Commerce. She's also a member of the Executive Committee of the Women's Leadership Board of Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government. And finally, a loyal Trojan who received her Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science from USC. Welcome, Diane. It's great to have you here. Next is Darryl McCullough. Come on up, Darryl. Darryl is a USC Annenberg alumnus. He has nearly 25 years of communications experience and leads Payne PR in areas of client strategy and innovation. Over 17 years at Payne PR, his work on major brand building campaigns for clients like Taco Bell, Sony, Procter & Gamble, Experian, Hilton Garden Inn, and Blockbuster have been widely recognized as industry leading. He helmed the team that launched XM Satellite Radio, serving as lead strategist for a campaign that was honored with the coveted Best of Silver Anvil Award in 2002. Darryl and the firm are nationally renowned for creating innovative brand-building strategies that include buzz marketing, experiential marketing, social new media, as well as social marketing and education, sustainability, and diversity. Payne PR is a leading creative agency famous for non-traditional campaigns like the groundbreaking, everybody remember the Taco Liberty Bell April Fool's Day? Everybody remember that? Blame him. The firm was named Creative Agency of the Year 2 separate years and Best Agency to Work For among all U.S. PR firms by Paul Holmes in the Holmes Report. Great to have you, Darryl. And my colleague, Jonathan Taplin, has enjoyed a modicum of success and a highly eclectic career, despite his lack of a degree from USC. His areas of specialization are in international communications management in the field of digital media entertainment. He began his entertainment career in 1969 as, listen to this, tour manager for Bob Dylan and for the band. In 1973, he produced Martin Scorsese's first feature film, Mean Streets, which was selected for the Cannes Film Festival. Between 1974 and 1976, Jon produced 26 hours of television documentaries, including The Prize and Cadillac Desert for PBS, and 12 feature films, including The Last Waltz, Until the End of the World, Under Fire, and To Die For. His films were nominated for Oscar and Golden Globe Awards and chosen for the Cannes Film Festival 7 times. In 1984, Jon acted as the investment advisor to the Bass Brothers in their successful attempt to save Walt Disney Studios from a corporate raid. This experience brought him to Merrill Lynch, where he served as VP of Media Mergers and Acquisitions. In that role, he helped re-engineer the media landscape with transactions such as the leveraged buyout of Viacom. He was a founder of Entertainer and has served as its chairman and CEO since 1996. Entertainer was the pioneer video-on-demand company for both cable and broadband internet markets. He holds 2 patents, has beaten you by 1, Jon, and 2 patents for video-on-demand technologies. In December 2006, Jon was appointed by California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger to the California Broadband Task Force. He graduated from Princeton, is a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and sits on the advisory board of the Democracy Collaborative at the University of Maryland. Welcome, Jon. And so, as I've indicated, we'll ask each of our panelists to spend about 5 minutes talking about their responses to what Jon had to say and sharing some of their own thoughts on the future of the field. Diane, you want to kick it off?
We just sit here?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, it's hard. I don't know what's down there. Well, it's hard to follow those provocative and prescient thoughts. I learned a lot in a learning conversation this evening. So just to absorb that, in my role, as Jerry said, and first of all, good evening, everyone, and it's so great to be back to USC. So thank you, Jerry, and to the Dean, thank you for bringing us all together, and to my esteemed colleagues. My reaction is probably grounded in how we are living through this fast-changing environment. We all have our own personal experiences of transitioning through decades of change. And when I was a student at USC, and you didn't mention the year I graduated, but that's okay, 1973, clearly the internet was not even any kind of a thought, and computers were not even a thought. I was so thrilled to take this will really date me, my Smith Corona electric typewriter. But my DNA is all about words and communication. Both my parents were journalists. So I majored in poli-sci because that's kind of the political side of communication. And then I've evolved into the communication role. So when you're in the middle of this vortex of change, you know you're experiencing change and you want to just continue to get in front of it. I've always said that managing change is part of life. And I think we all will relate to the fact that we're never bored in this process because there is so much to learn. I think just the takeaway from Jon's comments to what perhaps many of you are thinking if you're students and entering into the working world, and how you apply and work for a small company or a large corporation. I think a lot of us today are really focused on looking at the employee. The words employees are our most important asset are not empty words. I mean, I think in my history of work in my career, the transition of the management, understanding that it really is employees that make the difference. Employees who need to be engaged and empowered, and through technology that is so possible today, not to fear it, just like IBM is realizing. It's to grab it and let employees feel empowered to make a difference. Today, the world is complex, it is global. Avery Dennison has employees in 60 countries. We sell our products in 120. We are all over the world. I was in China last week. I'll be there in 3 weeks. I used to, in the early parts of my life, my career, I was always going to Europe, Western Europe. So the change in the center of the universe is we all go to Asia. And out of our 36,000 employees, 19,000 of them are in Asia. And that's the world today. In fact, out there, Charlie, where's Charlie? Charlie was an intern in my shop a couple of years ago. He, among other great things he did for us, he did all of our Chinese translations. And translations is critical. If you're going to engage your employees and customers and suppliers and stakeholders, multiple languages. I mean, we translate our documents into about 30 different languages. And that's a constant process because it is so critical to engaging. In fact, technology is everywhere, but it's not everywhere. When we have 18,000 employees working in factories, they don't all have computers. So while we think the computer and the information age is ubiquitous, in China, yes it is, but are we reaching our employees through the public internet in China? And I'm not getting into the political issues that we're all reading about with Google. It's just, while we think information is ubiquitous, how do we reach our employees and engage them in ways that are meaningful to them in their daily lives? And it's not about letters from management. It's not about posters. It's not about brochures. It's the fundamental relationships that are forming with all of our stakeholders and how to engage them in ways that will make a difference in their lives and they will feel motivated. We, as all companies, we are good companies. Values are very critical to us, and we have values that started with the founder of our company. Avery Dennison is 75 years old this year. 75 years. Other than IBM and GE, I don't know how many companies, I mean a handful certainly, have lasted 75 years as an independent company. So you ask yourself, what is it that we must continue to do to make ourselves important to those who are out there working hard every day and representing the company at whatever front line they're on? And innovation and being a part of that change is absolutely critical. So I've kind of talked on a lot of different levels, but it comes right down to engaging people to tell your story and making that story compelling and interesting. As future communicators, let me just tell you, everything you've learned in school that's as people is so important, and teamwork and collaboration, they're being used all the time. Being influencers, we can't do what we do without influencing people to come along with us. You can't just stand up there and order people or audiences or customers or employees to follow along with you. You have to hit them, reach them in a way that's compelling in their heart and mind. And people are so smart and need to come along intellectually, and you have to keep finding different ways to do that. And we haven't found all the answers. My one lesson to everybody is, I've learned this, is having great people work with you and for you. And you can't do it alone, and you need to do it with great people who have creative ideas and that can inspire others and take you on this journey. So.
No doubt that'll always be true. John, have you found the answers?
No, but I thought John's talk was pretty amazing. And I just underlined a few words: transparency, authenticity. Companies can't live double lives. And as one who's appreciated the Smarter Planet campaign, because I'm interested in cities and how that urban thing works, I really found myself learning stuff from what you put out, what should be advertising, but it's more knowledge transference. But academics are not allowed just to be cheerleaders. And so part of what we have to do, I think, is say, okay, 100 years from now, what will be some of the things we will also have worried about from this this digital chaos that we're living in? And I just wrote down 4 things. One of which is personalization. It seems to me that what's happening deeply in the whole web ecosystem, the cell phone ecosystem, is a level of personalization that I'm going to have where my television will know who I am and where I am and what's sending, and I'll have a personalized ad being sent to me, just in the same way I have a personalized ad being sent to me on the web today. And my cell phone will know where I am, and location-based services will be an incredible part. And I tell my students a story of a kind of dream factory thing that Microsoft has led me into, where, okay, I'm watching. They start with the idea that the year before GM crashed, they spent $3 billion in America on automobile advertising, and they sold 6 million cars. So first off, of that $3 billion that they spent, 75% of the people who were watching that stuff weren't in the market for a car. So that was thrown away. And then from there, they had to divide the rest of that among 5 or 6, 7 companies. So the idea of these brainiacs was, well, what if we could overlay the Polk database of car leases on top of the database of your cable system, and we could only deliver a car ad to people who were in the last 3 months of a car lease. And then if you liked the ad, you'd hit a button on your TV, and then that would identify your local dealer that you were interested, and then you're out driving around the next morning, and your SMS rings on your phone, says, we see you're only 3 blocks away from the dealer if you come in the next half hour. Well, you're laughing, but this is all possible. So there's upsides and downsides to that. One of the downsides to me is privacy. And I think there's a huge debate going to go on amongst all of us about how much you want to let your data out. The second problem for me in personalization is what I call balkanization. So I write a blog, and I also write on Talking Points Memo. And I understand that the audience for the left blogosphere is basically reading left blogs, and they may not read anything from the right-hand side. And just to irritate myself, I listen to Rush Limbaugh on the way into work every morning, just so I at least know what he's talking about. But the point is, I think more and more of us are getting ourselves in information stovepipes to only hear what we want to hear, and to get filtered out everything that's that we don't want to know about. And John's thesis of the number of petabytes of information that is going out every day means that more and more we're going to seek these filters. And these filters may stop us from the random chance encounter with something that we didn't know about. And so that's a problem for me. The third thing that I worry about, and I think as IBM moved from a manufacturing company, manufacturing big hardware, to a service organization, that it had to face some of the problems that I face and my friends in the entertainment industry. All of my friends in the 60s who I worked with, who were songwriters, are very rich. Bob Dylan is very rich. Robbie Robertson is very rich. All of them who were just musicians are very poor, because the only thing America still makes, I think, that everybody else in the world wants is knowledge and desire. We make great movies, great software, great services, great video games, but be honest with you, in China, they don't give a damn about our software. I mean, our intellectual property is a concept that's rather foreign to them. And in India, when they decided that they wanted to make an AIDS retrovirus drug, they just took the American retrovirus drug and reverse engineered it, and made it a generic. When China decided that Viagra was too popular, they told Pfizer to pound sand, and it was going to become a generic. So I worry about a world in which we have created ourselves as a knowledge economy, but does anyone else care about that? And so that's the problem. And the final thing is social media. I think social media is extraordinarily important, and I was hired a few years ago to do some work for Merck about social media, and there's a big company, Merck. And they said, well, what do we do about this social media? So we did a little research, and it turned out that there were 8,000 of their employees were already on Facebook and had created a Merck Facebook network. I said, you're already in the social media game. You can't say, what do we do about this? You're not going to tell those 8,000 people they can't be on Facebook. So then the question is, well, does the CEO get on Facebook and become friends with all those employees? And I said, well, they don't want the CEO being their friend, you know? So it's a tricky issue. And so I don't know how companies as big as IBM navigate it, but I do know that their employees are already in the social network business. And how they harness it, to me, is the most exciting and yet dangerous problem to come up.
Darryl?
Well, I was genuinely inspired. I hope someone recorded it and puts it on YouTube because it was a very moving and motivating set of remarks. I think as someone who leads a team within an agency setting and some of you students that may be looking at jobs, the points of inspiration that you said that were important to IBM could be attached to almost any company who wants to do good and do good work and connect with their audience, whether it's a business-to-business audience or a business-to-consumer audience. So I think part of that is very powerful. Some of my staff are in the audience, and I think that they would take some of the words that you said about being a shared values-oriented organization with management discipline that is inward and outward looking and focused on continual improvement with management rigor. I think they would say that that's what we call our agency as well. And I think that as you look to the future, if you ground a company or an organization with those types of kind of intrinsic values, you will be set up for success no matter where those next 100 years take us. They're kind of core values that are timeless. And I came prepared to talk about where technology was going, and that in 5 years, I saw a Morgan Stanley study recently that you probably saw, that in 5 years, more people will be using their mobile device to access the internet than their desktop, and that's probably something that IBM has heavily on their minds. But your speech actually inspired me to think more about this notion of an inside-out approach to communicating, and that companies with transparency and that are grounded with purpose can actually connect on a more deeper level and for a longer period of time with their target audience with meaning. And you know, that hook and hold that used to be an old marketing cliche now has teeth to it because it's actually genuine. And that's moving to me and inspirational. And it made me think about three old guys that we studied all here and elsewhere, Deming, Drucker, and Everett Rogers. And if you think about those three guys, Deming about continual improvement and process optimization, he reinvented the way we do business. His teachings are still timeless today and will carry us all forward. Drucker took everything that Deming believed in and added values orientation and purpose and social responsibility, those big notions, brought those to companies like P&G and IBM and others. And then Rogers, a professor here who I studied with, talked about diffusion of innovation. And he invented the curve, and he said all you do is if you study the curve and how people relate, where they fall on the curve and how they relate to a new medium or a new message or a new product, you will be able to know how to interact with those folks. So in those three teachings, three different people, I think you have the grounding for success. Again, no matter where technology happens to go, and it's going to go at a rocket pace, we won't be able to keep up. But if we kind of ground ourselves in those kind of core principles and classic wisdom, I think we'll be great. One of the other things that you talked about, the notion of insights, your brand is about insights and creating demand and having stewardship, building stewardship, I think is also a really important notion that will be important moving forward for folks, particularly on the communications discipline. You know, we learn how to write, we learn how to write in PR, we learn how to write a press release, we learn how to create a video, but where is press releases and videos in the notion of insights, demand, and stewardship? It's not there. I think it needs to be the fundamentals of a communicator need to be grounded in research, in strategic thinking, in channel planning, things that we don't typically have on a curriculum right now. And I think that those are the things that we're looking at as we build our new agency for the next 10 years. We're hiring strategic planners. We're hiring digital channel planners, not just social media specialists, but thinking out beyond that. So I think you are truly leading, and it's inspiring to hear how you're both grounded in the kind of classic wisdom, but also in future things. So thrilled to hear it.
With that, let's see if we have any questions. We have a couple of, we have a mic here, and we have a mic over here. And if you have a question, just step right up to the mic and fire away, anything at all. I'll start with one. Jon?
Yeah.
I'm going to walk over there to that mic, I guess. The issue of constituency building seems like a really crucial kind of strategy when we're thinking ahead. But I'm wondering how it fits with John Taplin's thinking on silos, on balkanization, and so forth. Is there a risk that as we move forward and the whole notion of creating constituencies becomes a core strategy among all kinds of organizations, how many constituencies can people belong to? And at what point does constituency building prove divisive and perhaps risky when you're seeking consensus on a broad scale?
I thought John's point about the balkanization is fascinating, and I'm going to do more thinking about that. I think it's a real risk to society, you know, and into public discourse. It's really interesting. So I can't comment at this time about the risks of that, but this idea of constituency, as I describe, a different kind of segmentation, I think as we are inundated with more and more information, and therefore simply being aware of happenings is not only commoditizing, which is causing problems for journalistic organizations, but it saturates us with things that are happening in the world. The desire for context and meaning will increase. And I read not long ago that journalism needs a new metaphor, that the idea of a gatekeeper to news in the global digital commons is, it's gone. So what is it? And, guides and context. So I think the competition is going to shift to which context, which interpretation of this is going to be more valid and more correct, whether it's in politics or in business. And constituency is trying to find people who have shared beliefs. The risk is that's all you listen to because that's all you want to listen to. I think from a business standpoint, this is a very powerful new concept of segmentation or audience finding, but also creating one. Creating one. And in our case at IBM, I heard the term several times this evening, business to consumer and business to business. Well, even in business to business, decisions are made by human beings. And we actually are trying not to use the term B2C or B2B, but individuals. And how many constituencies can a person belong to? Well, ever since we sold the PC business to Lenovo, I couldn't have an interaction with an IBM group without getting a question saying, when are we going to get back into the consumer business? And I'd say, well, why do you want us to get into a business with razor-thin margins and we have demonstrated no competence that we know how to be in a consumer business? I mean, why do you want us to get back in the consumer business? And it turns out that invariably, they don't want us to get back in the consumer business. They want us to be relevant to individuals. The challenge for a lot of brands or companies or institutions is some are visibility, like I don't recognize you, I don't know you, I don't know your product. That's not a problem for many, and it's not a problem for IBM. Our problem or challenge is one of relevance. So it turns out, and then I'd say, well, what do you think we should mean or stand for to the individual, the human, right? And invariably I'd hear, we ought to be cool. Or we ought to be hip, we ought to be lighthearted. And I'd say, well, I think if you stay parked over not the consumer, but the idea that we ought to be relevant, and that we ought to have an emotional connection to things people care about. It turns out with Smarter Planet, it turns out there is a part of us as individuals that are consumers and we care about movies and music players and vacations. But there's a part of every individual who also cares about energy, water, traffic, crime, healthcare, cities, carbon, food traceability, on and on. That's what we found. That's a constituency that we frankly didn't seek to find, but it turns out that when people say, you know, I really am learning something from your message here, it's not just the CEO, it's younger people. We didn't seek to have a platform that appealed to younger people, but we found a constituency that says, I believe in that too. So I think there's a lot of constituencies that a person can say, I believe that. I'm a father, I live in Connecticut, I'm a minority, I have kids, I have a healthcare problem, I believe this, I believe that. There's a lot.
I would say also that your notion of eminence is hip. In other words, one of the problems right now is there are too many experts who have no expertise whatsoever. Everybody's got an opinion. And I came from an era where, you know, there were actually people who you could call them a priesthood, but they actually had an opinion. Pauline Kael was the critic for the New Yorker magazine in films. And if she hated your film, you were dead. And if she loved your film, you were king of the mountain. And that's what happened. Marty Scorsese and I had this little movie called Mean Streets, and she loved it. And she wrote a 9-page review on it, and it went through the roof. So I miss the time when there were actually experts. There are no critics now. I mean, Transformers comes out, and it's like the worst movie ever made. And nobody cares that it's the worst movie ever made, you know? So I think this idea of eminence is going to become important. And how you build that in a company is really, it's like how we build the eminence at Annenberg. You know, are there enough people who
I'm going to tell my kids two things. That you said something I said was hip, and that somebody else agrees with me that Transformers was a pretty lousy movie.
Hi, I'm Laura Jackson, and I'm an independent consultant and an adjunct here at Annenberg. And this semester in particular, teaching a class on legal, ethical, and social foundations in public relations. So we are adding a little bit of some of the topics to the curriculum, and it's exciting to be with the students and do this. I would love to hear, time permitting, from each of you about this idea of how much a company should regulate its employees' participations in social media. Because on the one hand, I hear Jon basically advocating for, we have experts and let them be known, let them rise up and let them be the stars, truly, the stars, the living ambassadors of our organizations. On the other hand, you have the disgruntled, the mildly disaffected, and then of course on the far side, the activists. So to what degree is it appropriate to be developing policy within companies that says, this you may say as long as it's happy, happy, and this we don't want to hear so much? Or is it really that you're willing to allow all employees to really express where they are at the time? So I'd love to hear. Thanks.
I'll start. I find it a fascinating question because we're asked by our clients that same question over and over again, and our response is that if your employee could just as easily go home after work hours and communicate through any form of social media or blog or other vehicle, those same sentiments, and you would have absolutely zero kind of monitoring or control over that, how happy would you be about that? So giving them the forum and the open access to free communications is part of that shared values culture that if you as an organization embrace openness, should be something that you would embrace as a brand. And the other piece, I was on the team that helped develop a internal intranet program for McDonald's. McDonald's in North America has 1 million employees, and they're entry-level jobs. And make no excuse, they are not fun jobs. They're hourly, low-paying jobs, and these are not highly educated employees in many cases. But they created a forum called Channel M, or Station M, excuse me, that was Facebook-like in its orientation and gave everybody, even if they didn't have a computer at home, and some of them didn't at the time, gave everybody access to upload pictures from work, from their mobile phones, to chat with other store workers in other cities, and it gave them that access to be a real citizen. And it has been revolutionary for the company. It's actually made them a more attractive workplace for recruiting. And that was their #1 issue at the time. How do you keep those low-level paying hourly jobs filled? So I think if you embrace it from the inside out and give a vehicle that allows people to utilize that with rules, I mean, I think you need to have attached rules and access points to it, but it can be very powerful.
I agree with the rules thing. Disney makes screenwriters working for them sign in their contract that they will not tweet or blog about a movie until it's out. In other words, oftentimes movies, when they're in production, seem like a total disaster. And if you have some screenwriter who's been told by the director, go in your trailer and don't bother me anymore, and so he starts tweeting, this is the worst movie that's ever made, it could ruin the reputation of the movie. And nobody in Hollywood ever thought the screenwriter was in charge anyway, but I mean, so that's probably a good rule. Like, you wait till the movie's out, then you can bitch all you want about it,
Well, and also just to follow up, we believe in a sense of more of a democracy around it. I mean, that the world, as Darryl said, I mean, the avenues of communication are plentiful. Just putting some general guidelines, do not communicate wherever, anywhere, whether it's social media or in any way, confidential information about the company, then the rest is pretty sensible, because if they have something unpleasant to say, they're going to say it. If they have something good to say, they may say it. Some of the haranguers kind of get sorted out anyway, and at some point kind of discounted in the whole social discourse. So, we have very few rules, and it seems to work.
Also, if the company or the organization is really fearful of opening up in any way, of allowing its employees to speak publicly about the organization, then I think the job becomes one of turning the question back on management.
That's a problem.
Yeah, and saying, what is it about your organization that makes you so fearful of external communication? It could be a real tip-off that there's something amiss in the organization. Yeah. Dennis?
Hi. We practitioners have spent the last couple of years being forced into the question of answering what are the metrics? How do we value what we do to either people that are hiring us or internally justifying our departments? And now I'm hearing two sides of the equation here. One is that there is a whole new wave of thinking here that we have to commoditize or put prices to our metrics to. And yet John's saying the rest of the world won't buy it anyway because they're going to make it generic. So my question is to the panel, this now seems like we have to put a whole new range of thinking about justifying these processes that you're talking about in terms of how we're going to communicate in a social media network. I'd be curious to know if anybody's kind of started thinking about how to maybe shift these metrics into new forms of measurement that we can convince our bosses and the people who
maybe think of it in terms of constituencies too. How do you measure constituencies?
Well, let's talk about one measurement: return on investment. But when I joined IBM, we had a global television network inside of the company to communicate with employees. We had a professional studio. We had satellite dishes on the roof. We had former professional network anchor people doing daily broadcasts beamed into televisions all over the company to say, IBM Today. It was called IBM Today.
Oh.
Wow.
Now, what was the cost of that investment to show efficacy? Oh, tremendous, right? By the way, it's all gone today. Now, everyone focuses, well, how do you measure the value of social media? My question is not the R part of ROI, but the I. The reason why this is becoming a global historic phenomenon is because it's almost free. So what is the cost of embracing social media, of distributing our own videos on YouTube versus spending millions of dollars for the privilege of broadcasting it to a diminishing audience who TiVos it anyway and strips off the ads? What is the cost? So since it's almost no cost, the real return or it's risk. You know, it's not the cost of doing it, it's the risk of doing it. And so just to circle back to the other question here, just my own 2 cents on that, 95% of the issues and fears that come up are already covered, once you get past the emotion, are already covered by existing business practices and policies. You know, do they want the screenwriter to, at a party, saying what a lousy movie? No, they don't want that. Do we want our scientists talking about intellectual property and patents anyway? No, it's covered. Are people going to get recruited from the company via LinkedIn? They're getting recruited anyway. So most of it's already covered. The one additional thing that is new that we've put into our guidelines, and this helps to mitigate the risk, which relates to ROI, is you do have to make it clear if you're speaking on behalf of the corporation or on behalf of yourself as a professional in a field or yourself as a private citizen. If you are making it clear how you're representing yourself, constituency that you're speaking on, we're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Because it turns out that only a small number of people are kind of authorized to speak officially about our earnings or about our about our intellectual property or what have you. Other than that, do we send our people to conferences to speak and to learn? All the time. We're comfortable with that. Do we monitor them when they go and talk to clients and represent our company's products? No, but we're comfortable with that. So that's the only new thing, is we have to kind of formally say, make it clear, you know, what opinion you are expressing, what knowledge. That is new. But in terms of measurement, I find if you just kind of address the investment side of it, a lot of it actually kind of goes away.
I would also say that from a measurement point of view, if we can get past the privacy issue, the measurement on social networks is astonishing in the sense of Facebook probably has more data than you could even imagine, because on every single member, they know your music preferences, your movie likes, where you went on vacation last week. I mean, they know so much, and obviously they're having trouble with their community allowing advertisers to have access to that, but at some point we're going to get to a place where you either opt in or opt out, or you'll give someone permission in return for getting more relevant advertising, relevant communications back to you. As one of my students said, if I say I'm in a relationship, don't put a Match.com ad up on my Facebook page.
Diane has a different opinion.
No, yeah. Actually, the measurement aspect of everything we do is only going to get more and more. I mean, Google is all about metrics and analytics, and Google is the world's largest advertising agency or medium, and so it's all about precision in usage and who's clicking where and how long are they sticking, and with the Facebook data and those issues related to privacy. But there's more measurement today than ever before, and those numbers can work to your advantage, and it helps guide you in how you shape what it is, how you adjust your message, adjust your websites, adjust your channels of distribution. If no one's going there, you change it. So it's enriching the communication delivery mechanism, because you have data to tell you if it's a good idea or not, if anybody's listening or reading or watching.
One quick thing about just there's power in tracking the message adoption. So not getting hung up necessarily in all of the dollar signs, but if that message is moving up that diffusion curve And it may only be with 80 people, but if those are the right 80 people that are adopting that message, it's extraordinarily powerful. So I think the power of communicators and making sure that we are monitoring and tracking the message thread through communities or constituencies, that's where the power is. And I've seen the best marketers at P&G get very, very excited about a blog hit when it's a blog that's read by the 80 most influential people in their sector. So
that's a really important point that shouldn't be underestimated. We're talking about we're transitioning almost overnight from a mass media model to a micro media model, from a mass audience model to a micro audience model. Those 80 folks, right? Now think about, we're supposed to be talking here about 10 years out. What's that going to look like in 10 years? You know, what kind of an audience will we really be targeting at that point? And are we each going to have to be psychiatrists to understand one individual, right, who becomes our target audience? You know, it could get, obviously I'm being facetious, but, you know, carry it out. Think about how this micro-marketing becomes more and more micro in nature.
10 years is there now. I mean, just what you were talking about. There's data, there's analytics to say if you're looking for a car and you're leasing, I mean, all that is there. I mean, that's happening now. That's how marketers are marketing today.
You have to wonder if there's going to be a tipping point at which people are going to say, enough. But we have a question over here from Mr. Kelly.
Hi, I'm Alan Kelly, a class of 1781, and a loyal student to Kenneth Owler Smith. And if he was here looking down, and we hope he is, he would be loving this, because Ken was a maverick, and he loved the great thinking and the great questions, and you all are honoring him tonight, and I think that's just great. I have many questions, as Ken might want me to have, but I'll try to ask just a few of them. By the way, I have a side note. On measurement, I will posit to you that the discrete units of our practice are not the outcomes, the outtakes, and so on and so forth. They are, in fact, the influence strategies. This is something that I, in fact, have had the privilege of teaching here at USC. A couple questions. John, I think you made news tonight. Maybe you've said it before, but I think you said, just as Regis McKenna said many years ago, PR is dead. I think you said reputation management is dead. In so many words, I love your analogy between the tree and the shadow, that you can manage one but be another. And I think you in so many words said that it's really not possible to chase that shadow in the form of reputation and managing it. Is that what I heard?
You know, there's a lot of discussions and debate, as you know, about, well, what do we call ourselves, you know, PR or corporate communications or corporate affairs or reputation management. And I for one, don't know what we should call ourselves, but I know what we're not. And I do think, and Lincoln was the one who came up with that wonderful image of the tree and the shadow. I'm not a fan of those who think that we can manage reputation, as I said in my remarks, as a field unto itself, and not deal with the reality of it. And I mean, I just don't believe it's possible, and I think it's kind of an unsavory endeavor anyway. It's just not possible today. And so dealing with the behavior and reality of individuals, if you're counseling individuals, or dealing with the reality and behavior of institutions, that is a field. That is a field. I mean, Harold Burson said, I think, public relations is equal parts communication and behavior. And I think that's true. I mean, he was describing the tree and the shadow, right? You want to actually be known for what it is you do.
A quick follow-up question. I'll sit down. But again, as I've listened to you in your other writings and things, you are almost sounding like you're talking about, and we are here at an educational institution, you're almost saying that as you project out that one should be teaching and studying here and becoming really an organizational psychologist. If I plot what you're saying, to me, that's where I go.
I don't know if it's psychology, but if the beginning of our work, the beginning of the work is not the communication part of it, the beginning of work is the definitional part of what an organization or institution is. And it's not the same thing as strategy, because that's practiced by others, and it's a field, and it's an important one. But if you start with why does the world need another IBM? why does the world need another startup? What are we going to not sell, but what are we going to do? What are we going to, what do we believe in? And what will we do uniquely in the world? I think that's something that none of the other C-suite officers actually start to ask. Sometimes it's asked later in an institutions when they have an identity crisis, like, you know, we're going to have to go to some new product set, and they have this jarring moment of disruption. So I think that it's not so much psychology as it is, let's ground the institution in a clear sense of what it stands for, believes, its point of view, what will it do uniquely for a long time. Being differentiating and having that being an enduring idea is very difficult to do. And if that's the beginning, then the rest of the work is fidelity to that. It's ensuring fidelity with that which the institution says it will do uniquely in the world. And again, you know, I wish values didn't so often equate to ethics, because that's table stakes. It should be what we will do uniquely in the world, and can we be that thing consistently as times change. I think that is something that is the beginning of our work.
Those of you, if I may just for a sec before I forget this, because I will, those of you who were here for last year's Smith Symposium heard the eloquent and rambunctious Paul Holmes sum things up in a very few words. What Paul said was, you can no longer distinguish between policy and public relations. They are one and the same. Who you are is what you are. What you do is who you are. Yeah. The tree and the shadow are of one.
I would just take a kind of a case study when Nike got into trouble with the sweatshop issue. The first 9 months, they tried reputation management. They tried everything they could do without changing their outsourcing strategy at all. And it didn't work because there was too much transparency in the world. The students and the activists always knew, and they went to the Nike factories in Thailand and saw people getting paid, you know, 12-year-olds getting paid $1 a day or a half of that. And it just didn't work. And eventually they had to give up, and they had to stop leading what you call the double life. And they had to become a more righteous company in terms of the way they got their product. So I don't think you can do reputation management.
We had a young lady. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The psychology of it, because I heard a very interesting strategic planner talk about the millennials and really broke them down as a group, and there are millennials in this audience, that they really do not embrace the notion of authority, and they've grown up being given the Team Spirit Award and win, lose, or draw, but they don't embrace the notion of authority or experts or influencers like generations before them. So it doesn't matter what the corporation does or says at all. It's more about what the peers that interpret what that corporation does that influence that audience. So there is this kind of sphere of influence approach that we need to keep in mind, and it's very psychologically grounded.
And this young woman is getting very tired standing here at the microphone with
My
a question.
question actually really relates to this, so it worked out perfectly. So we're talking about this kind of shift in the way that our companies are practicing what they're preaching. They're really following up on their brand promise. That's really who they are. And typically, that's a big change for companies, and typically that change isn't coming from the PR person or from the communications person. And a lot of times, us or our clients don't have that seat at the table to be there when they're making those decisions, to advise them, you know, this is the way to treat your people, or that you're not practicing what you preach here, and people are going to have something to say about that. So my question is really, how do we get that seat at the table? For a long time, we've said measurement, but it can't just be measurement. It has to be, to me, I think it has to be so much more than that. So that's kind of my question is, how do we get there? Because it all makes sense to us, but how do we get there to where they're listening and they're changing their practices?
Let me just take a quick initial shot at that, because we have some data on exactly that. We do the generally accepted practices study, the GAP study, and GAP 6 indicates that just under 60% of all senior communicators report directly to the C-suite. So that issue of not having the seat at the table ain't what it used to be. Now the question becomes, you've got the seat, what do you do when your butt is in it? Okay?
But you know, measurement still is important. I think in my own experience in my company, I could communicate to the cows come home that we've got to engage and do all these great employee authentic contact points, it's really the survey data, employee survey data, that really shows employees were disaffected, or this group of employees is not connected, and the engagement just came out of, if you regularly survey your employees, which we do, that was the most, it's like, come on, communications, get over here. We got to start doing. We now hear you. You're right. I'm sorry. We've ignored this for so long. Now we've got to engage, because the data that gave them the credit, data sells, facts sell. It's so critical, and it is rooted in data. It's very compelling, and that's what changed the day for us, is that employees were not engaged, and so now we're really working on it. We heard them.
I think one of the things that really advantages the communications executive, public relations executive, corporate affairs executive, compared to the rest of the West Wing, and it's often underplayed because they're of a background or a comfort zone, is the following. So the CFO thinks about the investor and the financials. The head of human resources thinks about employees, past, present, and future. You know what the general counsel thinks about. You know what the head of marketing thinks about. The marketplace, the customer, the future customer, and the competition. Who in the executive suite has to think about employees, past, present, future, the investor, the customer, the competition, the regulator, the government, the board of directors, management? Who's the only person on that floor who has to think about all this simultaneously? The CEO, the chief executive. And if we're the only ones going there with speeches or with the press, media, with slices of this, then that's how they're going to think of us. But if we realize that we are uniquely positioned to bring a total view of the enterprise, the alignment, the empathy, the support, the partnership that emerges from that is because they'll say, you understand what I have to do when leading this enterprise. Where I found it when talking to our colleagues and they say, my CEO doesn't get it, you say, what does your CEO think his or her job is? Maximizing shareholder value. Well, that's the beginning of it. Mm-hmm. So do they want to be a great employer and a great citizen and to offer killer products and grow shareholder value? No, that's the beginning of the problem. But if they say, no, they do want that, are you bringing strategies and ideas and measurement that reflect that totality? Because in this world, all those segments are conflating. CEO saying, who's going to help me make sense of this? Because this message is spilling over to this audience. Inside is outside. Who's going to help me do that? That is the opportunity right now to say, this is how we should think about the totality of the enterprise and how to do this. I think that has been an enormous sense, an opportunity to go and create that value. But we have to take that on. We have to do that.
And putting it in the context of, remember, we're looking 10 years out. Putting it in the context of what the field looks like 10 years from now. If what Jon said is true today. We talk a lot about it here at Annenberg. We talk a lot about a concept called communications at the center, which in a sense means it's the communications prerogative. It's the role that communications plays in shaping the organization, not just reflecting or communicating about the organization, but shaping the organization. If that's true today, think about it as things become more transparent over the next 4, 5, 6, or 8 or 10 years, which is going to happen at lightning speed.
Yeah, I also think that even the most hidebound, old-fashioned CEO eventually has to get it. I mean, you look at ExxonMobil. If there was a company that just was tone deaf in terms of what the public perception of their role in the ecology and the environment was, they didn't care. Our shareholder was all that counted to them. The EPS was it. Well, look at what they're doing now. All their ads are about, look at this scientist who's going to make use this new algae to make energy, and it's beginning to look like IBM advertising almost now. Yeah, so they obviously got it, that they couldn't just ignore this.
And Jon, you were saying? You were just saying about it's looking like IBM advertising.
Oh, that's an interesting coincidence.
They set the tone. That's the right line.
Hi, I'm Choiti Sen, second year graduate strategic PR student. So I had a question. From what I heard on this forum, I realized there are clusters of communication which is being formed, and most companies are trying to build experts within those clusters. So once, in 10 years' time, once those experts are created, how do you develop them? How do you manage your relationships with them? Do you manage it like you manage it now with traditional journalists, maybe journalists, or your bloggers? How would the management of those relationships change?
What happens when they become stars?
Well, Dean and I were talking about this earlier, about expertise and competencies, and he spoke of this in his remarks. And I don't know. All I know is that, if you think about my own experience at IBM, in 1984 when I joined the company, Fortune magazine declared us the most admired company in the world. In 1992 we were on the cover of Fortune called Dinosaurs, along with General Motors and Sears Roebuck. And today we're the second most valuable brand again. What did I learn for that? Continual renewal. And so you want to have an incredibly diverse team, as Diane spoke about, and diversity is of background, of perspective, of thinking, of work, and all the rest. And you just got to commit everybody to personal continual renewal. And how you conceive of your profession or your expertise and what makes you happy really matters, because I have a lot of people who said, I'm a media relations expert, that's what I love. Well, that was really great, but now it's becoming kind of marginalized. I love to write speeches, and they're very precise about what that means. Well, how important is that today? So if you define yourself by some channel or medium, you better guess correctly. But if you commit yourself to always learning and innovating, and this is something that the Dean is talking a lot about, that's probably the answer. So what do you do with those stars? You keep stretching them. You keep putting them into different situations, and you keep kicking them out of their comfort zones for their own good.
I would just add also content. It's all the reason PR professionals are great at social media in the conversation and why we're engaging is because we know the news that people can use, and there's something very compelling and shareable about that news that's important and shareable. So feed your experts and influencers with great content in the media that they need. So they may need it in print, they may need it online, they may need it to their mobile phone if they're out in the field, they may need it on video if they're trying to reach 1,000 students. So think about the message and then deliver it in the content that makes sense to them.
And it's 9 o'clock. We have one more question here.
Well, and I have just 3 quick things. First of all, my name is Astrid Scheel, and I'm a professor out at Cal State University, and I'm a refugee from corporate America. So I did corporate communications for 15 years before going back to school. The first thing I want to do is thank the panel and USC for this fabulous forum. The second thing I want to share is my particular favorite quote, which seems very appropriate for this, which was Ralph Waldo Emerson, who once said, "Who you are speaks so loudly, I cannot hear what you say." And so it's talking about, obviously, the inside out. And the third thing I think that's really critical for all of us in here is to realize very much what Jon has been talking about, is that organizations that don't renew experience a phenomenon called entropy, where they're so concerned about what's happening inside that they don't see what's happening on the outside. And I want to put this forth to all of the students in here and to our panelists as well, that as we continue to grow in the social media, we need to remember that it is all about the human component. It's very organic, and that if we are to continue to grow in what we do, we're going to have to reach out across the globe. The last thing I wanted to offer to you all is this. I interviewed Richard Edelman not too long ago, and for those of you who are in public relations, I asked him, what are you looking for in students? What are the 3 things that you want? And to my utter surprise, because I thought the first thing he was going to say is they have to know how to write. The first thing he said was, oh, they've got to really understand new communication techniques. They've got to be very comfortable with social media. They have to be authentic. They have to know how to do conversation online. The second thing he said is that they have to be well-traveled. A second language is more than appropriate. And the third thing he said is they have to be collaborative. And I said, what happened to writing? And he said, oh yeah, well that's a given. I expect you to do that. So I just wanted to thank you very much. Those are my comments.
Thanks for those great comments, and thank you.